This right here is the easiest raid XP farm in Minecraft that will give you all the valuable raid items, Totems of Undying, and you make a ton of levels too. It's super easy to build, maybe you could even do this on your first day, and it only needs these simple materials right here. So let's check it out. Okay, before we even place down the first brick, let's talk about where to position this farm in the first place. To make sure that all the raid enemies spawn exactly where we want them to, we ideally want to build this farm over a large area of water. To be more precise, you want to build this at least 128 blocks away from the nearest shoreline. The, by the way, easiest way to find out if you went far enough would be to simply go into the options and set your render distance to 8 chunks, because that is exactly 128 blocks. Once you are in the middle of the ocean and you don't see any land, then you know you went far enough. However, before you get into your boat and row all the way out into the ocean, we ideally want to bring a villager with ourselves right off the bat so that later we don't have to go back and get one. So take any villager from a village of your choice, or maybe if you have even a villager spawner, and lure them into your boat so you can bring them with yourself. Just very important here, you want to have this villager to be unoccupied so that you can later assign them a different job. Now, when we arrive at our destination with the boat and the villager in it, then there's one more very important tip that I have for you before we actually start building the farm. And that would be, don't just let the villager float in the boat on the open ocean, because it could happen that drowned enemies attack and kill him. Instead, what you want to do is build a little temporary platform, maybe with dirt blocks like I do right here, and put the boat on top of that. This way, the villager is safe. But alright. Now that we brought our resources and we have our villager, let's finally start building the farm. Starting out, we do by making a small little base platform that we're later gonna stand on. How big you make this doesn't really matter all too much. I personally prefer a 6x6 one. However, before you place this 6x6 platform on some random spot on the ocean, what you want to do first is press F3 and G on your keyboard together to activate the chunk borders in Minecraft. The reason for that is that ideally we want to build the whole farm in one chunk and not across a chunk border. So for this to work, you want to have your F3 overlay open, and right here you can see in which direction you're looking. Position yourself in a way that you're looking south, like I do right here, and then place your 6x6 platform in a way that there are at least 6 more blocks of open ocean between the south edge of the platform and the end of the current chunk that you're in. If you want to be 100% sure to do nothing wrong, you can build your 6x6 platform directly against the north border of the chunk that you're in. But alright, now that we have this little base platform, let's start making our collection system to get all the loot for us. And compared to most other farms, I actually like doing it a bit differently. Because for raid farms, we're gonna get a lot of items that don't stack, and therefore they pretty quickly fill up one single chest. That's why for raid farms, I actually like to build a 4 double chest layout like I show in the background right here, and then in the middle between those 4 chests, you want to place down 4 hoppers, one facing into each and every one of those chests. This way we have 4 times the storage space and it doesn't fill up all that quickly. On top of these hoppers, by the way, we now want to place down 4 bottom slabs, or alternatively 4 campfires. The difference here is, if you want to use this farm as an XP farm and actually take the enemies out by hand yourself, then you want to do it with the slabs. But if you want to have it as an AFK farm where the enemies automatically die, then use the campfires instead. And lastly, this is also very important for the raid farm, you gotta spawn-proof this platform so that raid enemies don't accidentally spawn down here. There are multiple ways to do this, for example, to place a button on each and every one of the blocks around, but you could also do it with carpets, for example, just something that enemies can't spawn on. And as always, I would be super happy if you could give me a quick like for the video, because it helps me a lot with the YouTube algorithm to get these guides out to more people. So thank you so much for the support. But okay, this would be our base platform with the collection system done. The next step is very simple, because all we gotta do here is make a tube into which the enemies fall down to take fall damage. For raid enemies, this needs to be 26 blocks high, so very simply, around the 4 hoppers, make a tower that is 26 blocks high, and then at the end, delete the bottom row of blocks so that you can then attack the enemies through the gap. However, now comes the most important part of the entire farm, so please listen up closely and follow it step by step, because otherwise it's not gonna work. When you stand on top of the tower, you want to open your F3 menu again and make sure that you're facing in the south direction. Into this direction, you now want to build a 6x4 platform against this tower. After that, at the drop tower again, you want to place down 2 trapdoors like I show here, so that the enemies can actually pathfind into the hole. Now, up next, to make sure that all the enemies that spawn on top of this platform here don't accidentally fall off the side, we're now going to build a ring of blocks all around the whole thing. And when you build it, make sure that on the spawning platform side, you actually make this ring 2 blocks wide instead of just 1, because it can happen that enemies accidentally bug through this ring and still fall down. However, if you make it 2 blocks wide, then you prevent that from happening. On the back side of the ring, on the other side of the drop hole, you're now going to place down 2 beds. This is to actually lure the enemies into the hole. However, unfortunately, there is still one more problem, and that is that the big ravagers can actually climb out of the whole contraption, and we don't want that. So, the way we prevent this is that we want to place a lava trap over the drop hole so that when the ravagers try to get out, they're going to get stuck in the lava and quickly die. The way we do this is actually very simple. First off, add a second layer of blocks on top of the ring on the back side around the hole. Then place 4 signs against the bottom side of the ring on the back, and then another 4 signs like I show right here, a bit higher on the front part of the hole. Over these signs, you now want to make another row of blocks, and then you're going to fill up the little gap on the back with a lava bucket. The signs should not prevent the lava from flowing down. However, when the Ravager walks into this, they will get stuck with their head in the lava and take a lot of damage, but they can never climb out because there is the bow of blocks above it. And because we placed the lava 2 blocks high, that means none of the other enemies can accidentally get caught in it. And then also here, the last step would be to spawn-proof this whole area in a way that the entire surface of the surrounding rings also needs to be covered with something that prevents enemy spawns. Either carpets, or specifically around the lava, go for buttons instead so they don't accidentally catch on fire. Just no matter what you do, make sure that absolutely every block except the spawning area in the middle is covered with something that prevents enemy spawns. But okay. Now that we have the spawning platform for the bad guys done, we of course also need to place the villager. To do that, go to the side of your drop tube and build a tower of 6 temporary blocks against it. On top of this tower, you're then going to place a working station. Which one doesn't really matter, I'm just going to take a barrel as an example here. And then around this barrel, you want to make a sort of containment capsule that is 2 blocks high so that the villager can fit right on top. Now, when it comes to getting the villager actually into here, that's surprisingly easier than you might think, because what you can do is just build a staircase out of temporary blocks. If you park the villager boat on a temporary surface like I showed in the beginning of the video, then all you gotta do is break the boat, and because we made sure to take an unoccupied villager, he should now automatically pathfind to the working station to pick up his job. And as you see right here, now that he is successfully in his trap, the only thing we gotta do is close the whole thing on top. Just very important with this step, you gotta make sure to also spawn-proof the top surface of this villager cell. You can either do this by placing buttons or carpets on top, or really use any type of other block that mobs can't spawn on. But now, before you can actually use the farm, you still need a couple of things. First of all, you of course need an ominous bottle that you can drink to start the raid in the first place. Ideally, you want to have an ominous bottle with a high level, because that means the raid will be stronger and the enemies have a higher chance of getting enchanted items. By the way, I'm planning to make an ominous bottle farm soon, so leave a sub if you don't want to miss that. The second thing you really want to have for this would be a sword with a looting 3 enchantment. Of course, you can also add other enchantments if you like, but especially looting 3 will give you so many more items. Lastly, and this is something that a lot of players miss I think, to get the best drops out of this, you want to make sure to set your game difficulty to hard. And now, check out these other 10 super easy farms that you can literally build in just 1 minute. See you next time, and until then, craft well.